There have been many times where it's been pretty much life or death, and every decision you make is a question of whether you survive or not. I learned probably that I could be confident in my abilities. I learned who I was. Hello, I'm Chris Howard, or Chris the Coast Walker, and I've just walked 10,000 miles. I actually feel like there's no one that can teach you about yourself except you, and you've got to put yourself in strange positions and strange environments and push yourself mentally and physically in order to learn about yourself and find out who you really are. I had been working in an office for the county council for about 6 or 7 years, and one Friday I remember coming back from lunch and I looked up and thought, I just had this epiphany moment, which is probably the classic way to put it, and I just stood there and thought, this is not my life. And I said to Tom, my best friend, how do you fancy rowing the Atlantic? And he kind of responded by saying, don't be so bloody stupid. And then 10 minutes of silence later, he'd been on his phone and said, actually, it's not that impossible. And I knew that was the kind of spark. 2 years later, we actually left from La Gomera in the Canary Islands, and we rowed 105 days across the Atlantic to Barbados. We were fully unsupported, probably one of the more mad and dangerous things I've done, and I think a lot of people around me believed it wasn't going to happen. I don't think anyone had the confidence that we would actually pull it off, but it was a journey fraught with danger, and anything that could go wrong on a boat went wrong on our boat. I've always tried to raise money for charity, kind of at the expense of my own physical and mental sanity. I've done a lot of long distance cycling, challenge events, marathons, etc. I'm currently walking the entire coast of mainland Britain, including any islands that are attached by a bridge or tidal causeway. I am doing that to raise money for another charity, that's BBC Children in Need. During the first lockdown period, I was looking at my own children playing in the garden and riding their bikes and seeing them laugh and run around with the hose, and we had that period of really good weather as well, and had my wife in the kitchen and I was looking out the back door at them playing, and I just realised how lucky they were by comparison to a lot of other children in the UK. So I wanted to do something else for charity and children specifically, and I said to my wife, I think I'd go for a bit of a walk around the coast. So she said, well, which bit? So I said, all of it. She said, okay. From that initial thought process of saying, this is what I want to do, and my wife saying, okay, how do we organise it, to knowing when I would leave, was actually only 3 weeks. So I came up with the idea, and then 3 weeks later I left as soon as the restrictions were lifted. So I left from Heacham South Beach, which is in Norfolk, and it's just before Hunstanton. That first day I ticked off 28 miles of that just over 11,000 mile total.
And keep myself going and trying to remain positive. So all this time spent alone without my family, and all this time in dangerous temperatures at the moment with very little water and weight on my back is going to test me, not just for a couple of days or a few weeks or a month, but for a whole year, possibly more.
I've sacrificed a year's salary to be doing this one, more than that now, and it's kind of become my existence. This is what I do, is walk, and in terms of a methodology is, I kind of walk every day, get up. My life has become quite simplified because of what I'm doing. It's a case of get up and walk, make food, go to sleep, get up and walk. It's pretty much as simple as that. Everybody asks me, what's your favourite place? Where's the best place you've been? But actually it's never about the places, it's always about the people. They make the place, and I've been shown a lot of kindness, just completely randomly as well. There's lots of accounts where people have turned up on the beach with a bag of food, for example, or offered me a night in an Airbnb that's attached to their house, or even in a caravan on their driveway. In cities, generally, I often get looked at as a homeless person or treated as a homeless person, and I'm sort of okay with that. But the weird thing about it is there's this kind of syndrome that I've picked up on, which is like eyes down, avoid eye contact with anything different or not familiar. And it's a really sad indictment of our times that we can't talk to homeless people. Realistically, we're all only ever one payday or bad decision away from being in their situation. You do get treated differently, and for us to pass judgment on them is wrong. We should be doing more about the homelessness situation across the UK. I never listen to music or have my headphones in because I want to hear the walk, I want to know what's going on, I want to be able to be immersed in it. And because of that, I've become incredibly mindful of the environment and the things around me. I've needed much less in terms of finances because I don't consume as much as I did. We're all guilty, whether we realise it or not, of consuming far, far too much. When I left, I was kind of probably a bit overweight, just like everybody after the first lockdown. I'd probably been drinking a bit more than I would have ordinarily, probably had a few too many cakes and scones and things like that. I quickly shed a lot of weight, and not just because I was walking, but because I was needing less calories. Everybody thinks that I'm going to need more and more fuel to keep me walking, but actually the reality has become that I maybe eat once a day. I learned that I was capable of surviving almost in any environment. It's a strange thing. It's not something you can be taught at a university or a college. You can't learn it in a book just by reading. You've got to be out there doing it and pushing yourself. And there was a couple of times in Cornwall through the end of the summer where it was really wet. I fell off a cliff, which is pretty hairy. The second day I did the same thing and the ground gave way beneath me. In Wales I never really had any danger apart from cows with calves and a bull. Scotland really was always my worry for danger, and especially getting to the more remote parts. In Cape Wrath I had early onset or early signs of hypothermia, so I had to rely on very basic survival skills in order to get me through the situation and find myself in a situation where I could get to shelter. I had to jump into a river that was in full spate and swim across it with my backpack on. I then had to find a way of getting shelter, making fire, making food, getting myself warm again, and there was a point where I knew I was hypothermic because I'd taken all my clothes off, but I was uncontrollably shivering. I wouldn't have been able to have a conversation with someone if they were with me. There was no point of rescue, there was a huge storm. Even if I had a way of calling for rescue, it wouldn't have been possible. Having that amount of mental resilience and being able to push yourself on and find a way of staying positive, and just even if it's finding that smallest thing that day to remain positive about. But until you're in the situation, you never really know how you're going to react, and it's that knowing how to react and respond to certain situations that makes the difference. There's all sorts of worldly commitments that you have to consider, but I wanted to sacrifice in order to get round in one consecutive go, and that's something that people don't think about. I've effectively sacrificed relationships with my wife, my children, my friends, my family in order to do what I have done. At points it's been a case of crying at night in my tent alone, and that's happened a lot. So that it will be monumental for me to finish, and I can't wait to get there. I'm excited to be able to spend time with my family and my children. I just hope that I've done enough by the end, and that it helps. I'm sure it will help more than one child, but even if it did help just one, that would have been good enough for me. I don't think it will be the most difficult thing I've ever achieved in the future, because there's potential that I'll do something else. That's dependent on my family and my wife. Yeah, it's definitely for sure been tougher than I ever imagined it would be, but it's been worth every step.